Hi, and welcome to Empowered Spirit Healing. My name is Paula, and today I have Jennifer with me from Ascension Energies and Sound. How are you going today, Jennifer?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Paula?
I'm good. We
Good.
are very excited because we are starting a new series together on YouTube. And we want to be discussing, we're going to start off with discussing some of the incredible things that Edgar Cayce has shared with us from all of his readings that he did over probably like a 20, 30-year period of time. So basically today, to start off, we just wanted to kind of give an overview of his life. We're not going to deep dive into it too much because there are other channels that have done that. We kind of want to just have it more as just like a casual discussion and just discussing some of the really interesting and intriguing parts of his life because he had a very, very interesting life. And I don't know if there, he's so unique. I don't think there's anybody else out there that has ever that's ever lived has been like Edgar Cayce. So we are so excited to share this knowledge with you and just kind of just have casual discussions about so many of the different topics that he has brought up. So Jennifer very cleverly has designed a beautiful PowerPoint presentation for us. So we're going to go through that and just share some of his life with you. So, Jennifer, can you see that okay?
Yep, yep.
Awesome. So, Edgar Cayce, and he's also known as America's Sleeping Prophet, and he was born on March 1887, and he passed away on January 3rd, 1945. So, this is showing, if we're going to go through his early years first. So, as you know, he was born on March 18th, which makes him a Pisces, which I find very interesting because I'm a Pisces. And Pisces are known because we're the last zodiac sign. We're known to have a lot of psychic abilities. So it's very interesting. Well, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
The water element. Water goes deep.
Yes, that's right. And
Yeah.
so he had psychic abilities from a very, very young age. He was able to see the little folk, they were his friends, and he basically communicated them. And he would often play by himself. And his parents were, starting to get a little bit concerned that he would spend so much time playing by himself. And he just said, "But I'm not by myself, I'm playing with my friends." But nobody else could see them.
Yeah. So interesting.
Also, we wanted to mention that at 3 years of age that he had an incident where he fell off a fence post and a nail that was sticking out of the fence post actually punctured his skull and went right in through into his brain. And it's interesting because sometimes people that have quite advanced psychic abilities will note that they have had some kind of an injury in their childhood, so it could have contributed to his abilities, but it also seems like he might have had those abilities beforehand. So that one's a bit hard to kind of tell. But then at 4 years of age, he was very, very close to his grandfather and he witnessed his grandfather. Surprisingly, he wasn't as sad as they thought he would have been because little did they know, he was just chatting to his grandfather on a daily basis. So it wasn't quite so upsetting for him. Is there anything you want to add, Jennifer?
No, I just wanted to say that I think his parents found him out in the barn talking to himself.
Yes.
And they were like, "Who are you talking to?" And he's like, "Well, Granddad.
Yeah.
He's here." So his family really struggled, like concerned that this he was saying these things. I mean, as any parent really might not necessarily grasp all of this. They just knew there was something different and very special about him, but it was probably very alarming for them as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
he
Absolutely.
a lot of bizarre stuff. So another thing that's really fascinating about Edgar Cayce is even though he had a lot of these psychic abilities, he was also raised in a very Christian community. And he did attend church and he was very good and very adept at the Bible.
Mhm.
And a lot of clergy or members of the church came to this young boy at 10 years old or so and would ask him to help them get the interpretation of the readings, and he taught adults this stuff. He also became a cemetery sexton at this church. Now, we're in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, so this is a very small community, late 1800s. So I'm assuming it's kind of like a little bit of like a one horse town. You got your church and everything evolved around that church. But he became a cemetery sexton, so he was digging graves. He also began to teach like Bible classes and things like that, all as a kid.
Yeah.
So he was very, and this
His
was really
knowledge.
before, yeah, his knowledge of this information was just awestruck to the community he was living in.
Yeah, absolutely. And he ends up becoming an official member of the church, which is
Yeah.
just incredible.
It, and even throughout his life, he taught different Bible studies, but when they found out how gifted he was shunned a lot. And we'll get into that a little more later, but he
Yeah.
always held his faith. He read the
Every
Bible once every year. He always held that faith. So I always thought that was really interesting about him, but he also allowed himself to expand at the same time
Yeah.
spiritually. Yeah.
And then at 12 years of age, he was hired as a hunting guide and was accidentally shot and left a piece of buckshot in his eye, which is,
Really wrong. I mean, I'm sorry. When we look at his life, this young man went through so many impacts of trauma
yeah,
physically, whether the fence post and getting shot. And that's not even all. I mean, he was constantly being challenged
yeah.
physically. So yeah, I don't know how much of an accident this was. It's just very curious. You'll see as we get going with
Mhm.
all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot of odd things that seem to happen to him in his life, which is just crazy.
Yes.
But he apparently, according to his son, when I was watching one of the documentaries on him, he's said he was a pretty average student and he was struggling quite a lot at school. But then it was when he was around 13 years of age, he saw an angel and he realized that when he rested his head over a book, he was able to basically have like a photographic memory of the book, which is just incredible. And
Mind
so
blowing.
in like just 1 year, he literally went through like three grades in 1 year of just
Wow.
yeah, it's just incredible. So he just went straight to the top of the class and he just was able to do things like find things that were lost and was able to know what a deck of cards, read a deck of cards when they were turned over. It's just incredible. So he just started to have these gifts. And then around 15 years of age, there was another odd incident where he was struck. They were playing monkey in the middle, and he was struck in the back. I think it was lower back, I think, with a baseball bat.
I'm not
Or was it his
sure.
yeah, he was struck with a baseball bat and he started exhibiting some strange behavior, which was not at all like him. He was kind of being rude and teasing and annoying people. And then, later on at home, apparently he was annoying his sisters and things like that. And then he got him off to bed and he was like predicting the next election and he was just saying some really odd things. And then he said, just as he started to get sleepy, he was like, "Oh, can you make this compress for me and put it on my back, and then I'll be fine." And so they did. They followed his instructions, and the next morning he woke up and he was perfectly fine, which is just it's like what kind of child knows this? It's just is it crazy? And then not long after that, he ends up going to work at his uncle's farm and leave school, which I think is probably quite common back in those days to
Yeah.
finish up
Yeah.
at that time. Yeah, so he had quite an interesting childhood.
Yeah. All of the combinations of all of those bizarre things happening, and then all the psychic style of gifts coming on, this clairvoyance he was receiving, just I can't imagine what his parents felt or what he felt and how scary that must have been.
Yeah.
But I really feel like he probably wasn't really ever scared because he seemed to be so spiritually advanced, such an advanced soul.
Yes.
He took it in stride because he stayed the course his entire life.
Hmm.
So one of his quotes that he says, so we're going to mention some of his trance quotes and some other quotes his family said about him throughout the presentation. So one thing he said was, quote, "There are no shortcuts to knowledge or wisdom or understanding. These must be lived and experienced by each and every soul," unquote.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's so
So
true. It's so
yeah,
true.
there's no shortcuts, there's no jumping steps. You have to do the entire journey
You do
every step of
because,
the way.
you can read about things, but until you actually experience it, it doesn't really integrate, the properly.
100%.
And it's through life experience that you learn so much as well. So yeah, it's very, very interesting childhood, but I think he was slightly comforted by the fact that his mum and his grandma, I think, were quite supportive of him and explained to him that his grandfather also had some interesting abilities. Apparently, he was able to like move furniture and stuff like that with his mind. Yeah, incredible.
Wow.
So I think those, just knowing that, that's kind of like with Sylvia Brown as well. Sylvia Brown also had psychic abilities from a very, very young age, and her grandmother had psychic abilities. And so she would often be comforted by the fact that, she's not
She
just the
wasn't
odd one out.
alone.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think when people have other family members that have the same thing, it's quite comforting for them. So yeah, but definitely a very interesting childhood. And you can see that, he was quite handsome young man.
He looks just kind of soulfully innocent, just
He does.
real, kind of a kind, just like, yeah.
Yeah, I get a
Yeah.
very genuine kind,
Yeah, genuine's a great term, a
mhm,
word to describe him
kind of
for sure.
vibe from him. So it seems like he had quite a few different jobs in his younger years, like gone from working on the farm to dry goods shops and then working in bookshops as well, which apparently he loved because he loved reading. And then at 23 years of age, he becomes an insurance salesman along with his father. And I'm not quite sure like how long he did that for, but he ends up,
I think it was about a year.
okay.
I'm feeling like I mean, I could be wrong. We're just going by memory, everyone. We're just, because it's a lot of information. But I think, yeah, he traveled about a year or so from my knowledge or memory. I could be wrong though. But yeah, and then he lost his voice. And I think it's interesting that he was trying to sell insurance and he lost his voice.
Yeah.
And he was particularly selling Woodsman of the World insurance, which was an interesting agency or entity of its own at the
Mhm.
time. There's very few woodsmen of the world markers or monuments being made today. I think there's like three in the United States, but they were the huge tree stumps.
Mhm.
So if you go into a cemetery and you see a tree stump, that goes back to the woodsmen of the world. Um, but yeah, so he lost his voice and he healed himself. He went to see a doctor, and was it like a year or two he was without his voice, it seems like, Paula?
Yeah, it
And
took quite a few sessions of hypnosis, but he apparently he tried so many different things, and then somebody had suggested to him to go see a hypnosis. So he goes and sees Al Lane, I believe, and has a hypnotic session with him. And then it's when he did that, this other entity kind of came through and suggested what he could do to help heal his voice. And then he coughed up some blood apparently, And yeah, and then slowly after that. So what's interesting is that when he was in the hypnotic state, his voice was normal. And then when he was out of the hypnotic state, it was still a bit iffy. So apparently it took a few months of having these hypnotic suggestions and going into hypnosis in order to be able to completely restore his voice. But yeah, so at around 24 years of age, he starts to get his voice back completely, and
Yeah.
ended up working as an apprentice photographer because he was like, that's the only kind of job he could do with no voice because he couldn't be a salesman anymore,
Yeah.
traveling around with no
Yeah.
voice. So yeah, and then that's when well, some people hear about him and his unusual circumstance, and
Yes.
then he ends up helping a very unusual case. If you want to discuss that, Jennifer.
Yeah. So Amy Dietrich was a girl from Hopkinsville, Kentucky,
Mhm.
and she was 2 years old. She had came down with the influenza, and she had these convulsions and seizures. And it went on for a couple years, and many doctors evaluated her, and nothing seemed to be helping it. Well, they gave Edgar a call, and of course, he did a reading on her, and he said that before she got the flu, there was a carriage incident that had injured her spine, which caused a bacteria to get in there. And he basically worked with an osteopath to do adjustments with her, and they got her straightened around. So Casey started working with local physicians, and he would basically go in and do the life reading and then pull together what could help the patient, and then the doctor would do the prescriptions or the licensed style stuff. But Casey could always come up with something to help these people, and it really he really started kind of becoming famous for that. That's when it really started taking off, was this Dietrich case. That's one of his most famous first cases.
Mhm. And then, local medical doctors were quite fascinated by him and
Yes.
his
They
abilities. And
couldn't,
so they start, studying with his and investigating his psychic abilities.
yes.
But
Without him
then,
really even knowing, which is
yes,
angered me. Um,
well, it's very wrong. And then they kind of went a little bit too far with what do they put needles under his fingernails?
they were apparently they poked like when he was in his trance,
Yeah.
they were poking needles under his nails. I've heard that one time they completely removed a nail. And
Oh,
he never, when he's in these trances, he's not like
got no
not feeling
idea.
it. And when he'd come out of these trances, he's like, "Oh my goodness, like where's my nail?" I mean, can you imagine?
Oh,
So there was so they were testing, they were running these tests and these experiments on him without knowing, because they just could not figure out how this man can lay down on a couch and just come up with this information that's just mind-blowing, that actually helps people.
yeah.
And of course, I imagine their noses were a little out of joint, because here they're doctors themselves, and here you've got this guy who's just a normal guy who's way far, in my opinion, advanced than what they even know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So they probably wanted to discredit him and
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
which is so unfair because all he was trying to do was just help people.
No, but some of these doctors, and they wrote articles on him, and that's what launched him. So it's like
Mhm.
when he started making the newspapers and stuff about this, that's when people really started taking note of this guy. And he almost, he was very sought after,
Mhm.
um, by a lot of doctors from states away, would write him and consult with him on cases. And the patient didn't have to be with Casey. The patient could be in another state or around the world or however. And Casey, if he had that consent, he could pull that information, and we'll get into more of that later. But yeah, it's very fascinating how he did what he did. And he was, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it really was incredible gift. In order for him to make his living, because he didn't really accept payments him to begin
Yes,
with
he
for his
didn't.
readings. So in order to make a living, he becomes a photographer after being an apprentice, and he opens a studio with a business partner in when he was 26 years of age.
He was a very talented photographer. Um,
Yes, he
he
was.
actually opened a second studio after he had a first studio, so he was very sought after as well with photography.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it seemed to come quite naturally to him,
natural
apparently.
to,
He
I was
was
gonna say
just,
very natural, I think, to him.
he was very
It
gifted.
saved his life and it damaged his life all at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, it's just kind of a catch-22 with him in the photography business.
Yeah. It's odd, isn't it? So we wanted to share this quote: ever be a worker as the bee, yes, but in that way in which it is ever a contribution to making thy portion of the earth a more beautiful place for men to live in. And that was from reading 3374-1. So I think that's very beautiful because yes, we can all work and play our part in the world, but we need to be doing it in a way that's contributing to the highest good of others,
Yes. Yeah.
not just making money from everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll be learning about Gertrude, who becomes his wife, and they get married in June 17, 1903. And, I think they make quite a lovely couple.
Yeah, well, I think she heard about that Dietrich case and she's like, this is interesting. But it was a very big struggle with his abilities in their marriage.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of pressure for him to be normal, and that's where the photography came in as well.
Definitely. And I think
Yeah.
he also, yeah, he felt the pressure to have a normal job and to
Yes.
be a normal person. So that's why photography worked quite well for him. But also, I imagine being a Pisces and the kind of person that he was very creative. So that's why photography would have been such a beautiful creative outlet for him. So
Yeah, I wonder if he took her pictures. Like, I wonder if he,
yeah, like this one here. I
yeah.
wonder if he took that
Because I
one.
mean, it's outside. Because back in that time, there was a lot of, and he ended up being a traveling photographer at some point in his life too. But he, a lot of those people had those backdrops, and like when I did my
Yeah.
family's genealogy, and I was in certain like a 10-year time frame, they all had the same backdrop,
Oh, wow.
all the same like. Yeah, so here we have a picture of Gertrude that looks like she's in a park, but that very well could have been one of those fancy
Background.
backdrops too. But I bet he took her to the park. I'd hope he took her to the park. But yeah.
So they actually met through a family called the Salter family, which was a bit of I think it was a kind of family in town that was, a little bit more on the wild side, kind of a bit more open-minded to different things. And they were just absolutely intrigued by Edgar Cayce and thought he was fascinating and loved learning about his different gifts. And they would love playing games with him, like, what card is this? And can you find that? And that kind of thing. And it seems like they probably had like a bit of an open house and had lots of people coming and visiting and socializing. And that's where he met Gertrude. And, I think he thought she was the most beautiful girl in town. And he
Well,
was,
yeah, the little town of Hopkinsville. I
yeah,
mean, if you think about like because I try to put myself a little bit in that time period just to get some sense of
what
knowing,
it
and
would be
yeah,
like.
you would have a very, there'd be just you'd have your eye on just someone of the
Yeah.
selection you had, and it's just kind of funny how back in the time how simple it was to just go mingle at a picnic,
Yeah.
a small community picnic. Things are so
Yeah.
complicated with picnics nowadays. Then I'm
Yeah.
sure they were more of a event for just people to come together and probably gossip. I'm sure Edgar was the gossip of the town for a long time
Yeah.
since he was a kid. So I bet you they knew a lot about him before he really knew much about them, I would think.
Absolutely. And they were probably intrigued by him. And so they probably,
Yeah.
social when they had social events, probably encouraged him to talk. And then I think because they were so open-minded, they weren't judgmental of his gifts. he felt so at home with them. It
Yeah.
was like another family away from his own family, which is just so beautiful to experience because when you're different and you just feel like everyone's judging you and thinking that, you've got the devil in you or, which is what some people said about him, is just awful and it just makes you feel, like you're just not part of anything. So it's just lovely that he met them at 20 years of age. Edgar Cayce proposes to Gertrude, and they end up being engaged for quite a long time, quite a few years, because of just different struggles that he has, which we'll soon learn about. But and then they ended up getting married on June 17th in 1903. But it seems that Gertrude kind of like, even though she obviously connected with Edgar and really cared for him and loved him, otherwise she wouldn't have married him. But I think she did struggle a lot with his gifts. And I think she very much just wanted to just live a normal life, quiet life, like everybody else. So I think that was a little bit of an issue in their marriage for some time. And then they have two sons with quite a big age gap. So they have Hugh Lynn first. And after they have Hugh Lynn, she ends up falling pregnant again. And unfortunately, the baby becomes quite sick and ends up passing away. After that, I think Gertrude went into quite a bit of depression and she ends up getting sick and getting tuberculosis, which is basically fatal, which is so scary. So I think in her desperation, she actually asks Edgar Cayce to do a reading on her. And in that reading comes up some pretty crazy kinds of remedies. And I think she's just at the point where she's just willing to try it. And it works. And she ends up getting better after several
Yeah.
weeks. Mhm.
Which was very mind-blowing for all the townsfolk because
And the doctors.
tuberculosis, yeah, at that time, tuberculosis was a death sentence.
Yeah.
And many people were passing away from that illness, and it took her months to recover with his recommendations, but she fully recovered.
Yeah.
And even in
Incredible.
like even yeah, before that, like after we're just going into all the hardships they faced, but once they had Hugh Lynn, the first son, I think he was a couple years old. Um, his photography studios kind of kept catching on fire. He had two photography studios, and one was burned down, and then the second one was burned down. And even in all this chaos, when Hugh Lynn gets older, because Casey did continue with photography, but he sustained an incident where the lights went off at one of his father's photography studios, and it damaged his eye terribly to
Yeah.
where the doctors thought, we're going to have to remove the eye. And Hugh, being a little boy, was like, "Hey, Dad, can you help fix me?" And he did.
Yeah.
His dad went into a trance and come up with these different remedies and stuff, and Hugh Lynn got his sight back.
Which is amazing.
Amazing. 6-year-old little boy.
Hmm. And I think those
Yeah.
two incidences of seeing his two most loved people being healed from his readings just really cemented that this was a gift. And also for Gertrude as well, she was on board after that. She was like, yep.
Yeah, she was. She's like,
She,
I'm gonna step in here. I'm gonna be more involved with this. She
yeah.
became, very involved with his life. But this next quote is a really interesting one from a Casey reading. Quote, "Make concessions only to the weak, defy the strong if thy are in the wrong." Unquote. Reading 1336-1. So I think that's a really powerful statement that doesn't really say a whole lot, but also says everything.
Yeah, definitely.
And
So
there's the fam.
Yeah, so they had two boys. So we mentioned Hugh Lynn. He was born on March 16th, 1907. And then they had little Edgar Evans Cayce, who was born on February 9th, 1918. And then Hugh Lynn passed away in 1982, and Edgar passed away in 2013. So
Which is, yeah, and
that's
it's mind-blowing
horrible.
to me. And I feel bad because, it's like Edgar Evans lived till 2013. And I was studying Edgar's work in 2013, before 2013, and I never once I wish I could have reached out to him or went to the ARE and met him or something. Like, I feel kind of like I missed out on that because I just never thought about his kids. I just studied his work.
Uh-huh.
But the more, the good thing about the internet is one of the good things I should say is you can have access to this information. And I don't think I ever knew I never knew much about his family. I just had his books.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that's okay. I mean,
it
whatever's
is
meant to
okay.
be will be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The juicy part.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about the juicy part.
So yeah, the manipulators Edgar Cayce and who he read for. So it's funny, it's really interesting and funny. And we didn't go into the depths of it. That, like Paula said in the beginning, there's a ton of great information and a lot of great content out there about who Edgar was involved with, what their names were, who the investors were, and he was very the entertainers, the wealthy, the politicians were very drawn to him. They wanted to have a reading to him. Um, so Marilyn Monroe was a big Edgar Cayce fan. Didn't know that. I guess she was very into studying the occult. She
Yeah.
specifically saw Edgar Cayce out for cosmic knowledge. Thomas Edison, which I think is a really fascinating one. He also read Nikolai Tesla, which is another fascinating one. I've heard that the Nikolai Tesla reading has been removed from the ARE. It's nobody can find it.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the another interesting one was Harry Houdini was a very big magician back in the day, and Harry Houdini was not a fan of spiritual people. He always wanted to debunk everybody, wanted to prove that they were lying. He didn't trust tarot readers, any of that stuff. And he did have a reading with Edgar Cayce. He went to, I believe, Kentucky to see him,
Yeah,
and
right.
Harry Houdini came out saying, I ain't got nothing on this guy. This guy's actually legitimate. Which everybody was just kind of like, whoa, Harry
Yeah.
says what? And he also traveled to the White House to do a reading for Woodrow Wilson shortly after the ending of World War II, if I remember, or no, World War One, excuse me, if I remember correctly. So
Mhm.
that's very interesting. So it's just fascinating that the wealthy and elite wanted these readings from this man,
Yeah.
and that it's interesting because even if you look into presidential administrations, they always had a mystic by their side. You
They
didn't necessarily know they were a mystic, so did kings and queens. You didn't really understand that they were a mystic, but they're there. If you do your looking, you can find the astrologers and all of that. But but yeah, so we mentioned that many doctors and scientists studied Casey while he was in trance because it was just such a stumper on how this guy was doing what he was doing.
hmm
So that and then he had a lot of articles written about him and published about him, and just people were just blown away at what the sleeping prophet could do because they would just go in and say that he would go into a trance-like state.
Yeah.
So I'll
And
let you take a new
which
type of reading. Oh,
Yeah, well, I mean, it just would have been so unheard of, so strange. And
yes.
people would have been so curious. And once he started getting into the newspapers and things, people would literally be sending him money and letters, just asking for readings. And it's just so fascinating. But I did just want to add into the famous people.
Oh,
We were looking up Mitchell Hastings, who helped create the FM radio. So
yes.
apparently him and his wife would regularly catch up with Edgar Cayce and have reading sessions with him.
Yeah.
Also, so Jennifer and I have been watching, and we'll mention him below. We've been watching a lot of a guy called the Dark Journalist, and he has, oh my God, so much great information. He deep dives into Edgar Cayce.
He's,
Yeah.
yeah,
And if you want to know stuff that's not available to the general public, go watch The Dark Journalist because he's been reading Edgar Cayce books since he was a really young boy, wasn't he? Like, I don't know,
he's,
12 or something. I don't know, he
yeah.
was really young.
The
But
knowledge he has on Casey is impeccable.
it is.
And it's just in the connections he's made about Casey is
Exactly.
great.
Well, I
We'll
just
get there
wanted to
eventually, but yeah.
mention what's his name? That author.
You mean Hemingway?
Yes, Hemingway. That's the one.
Thanks for mentioning that because that's huge. Ernest Hemingway. Yes, a lot of readings with Casey.
And apparently they stayed with him. So,
Yes.
like, for like a whole month.
Yes.
So they
So
must have been good friends.
yes, because all the elites gravitated towards Casey because Casey held a key to something they were all seeking.
Yeah,
And it's really interesting, really interesting.
it is. So if
So
you
yeah,
want to deep dive into this stuff, then we suggest you check out The Dark Journalist for sure.
yeah.
So then in 1923, he meets and hires Gladys Davis she was only 18 years of age. And it is because of her that we have records. Apparently, she was just highly organized. She had like a photographic memory. And apparently, she just put all these systems in place. She was the one who kind of put in the number system and just helped keep a record. She would type up 2 copies of every reading, one to give to the patient and one to keep on file for Edgar Cayce. So it's because of her that we have all these readings. So she was really, really important. And it's not long after, like later on that year, that he started giving life readings because people were starting to question about astrology and things like that. And then he started learning about reincarnation and past lives and karma and how that affects us. And then also he started learning about Atlantis. He learnt that his wife had 3 past lives. He learnt that he had around 17 past lives. And one of his past lives was as a high priest called Rata in Atlantis. So in further episodes, we want to deep dive into that. We wanted to just kind of give a brief overview of his life to understand him and where he comes from and kind of work our way through to understanding the kind of readings and knowledge that he gives. But then we really want to deep dive into Atlantis and a lot of the tools that he's given us to help us with our healing and how to deal with this world. So that's kind of where we're going to be going with this series. But we just wanted to give an overview here. And so his son says Edgar was like an open door into another dimension. People were attracted to the light. And that is just so true. He really,
100%.
yeah.
Like
I
a
think,
moth to a
like I was
flame.
about to say, like a moth to a flame. Absolutely.
Yes. That's why he was sought after
Yeah.
immensely to where I've heard different times where he would give like up to 16 readings a day
Yeah.
at
Which,
one time
yeah, which
when his
really,
higher
really,
self was like, Edgar, you like do like two a day.
yeah.
And Edgar's like, yeah, no. And then, Edgar gave like great health advice, but he really was just kind of a everyday guy and didn't take his own advice like the rest of us in a
Yeah.
sense, you know.
It's so true.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So these are some of the articles that, we're talking about showing him. I know that this one upsets you quite a bit, Jennifer, because they're saying that he's an illiterate man, which he was not illiterate.
yeah, a literate man becomes doctor when he goes to sleep. Is that the New York? Yeah,
Hypnotized,
that was the,
re-hypnotized, yeah.
I think that was one of the first big published articles that came out on
Yeah, that was
him.
in 1910. So,
Yeah, and it's like you guys totally discrediting him
mhm.
and talk about a double-edged sword. And that's where that probably made him feel like, well, I've cured these people. Like, what kind of, I don't know, that would just really piss me off if I was him and I seen
Yeah.
that. It would just make
I
me so
mean,
mad.
they're going for the dramatization, but he was very literate. I mean, he read the Bible
Oh yeah.
every
He
year.
spoke he spoke
I'm
better than those doctors, I'm sure.
exactly.
When he was in trance, he had a language of like no other,
Yeah.
and yeah,
But even
very
as his
intricate.
normal self, I mean, reading the
Yeah.
Bible every year, that's a very advanced book to read. And he did that from a very young boy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
he is
I'm sure
definitely,
if yeah, if you met him on the street, he would be very intricately spoken.
yeah. Definitely.
100%. Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's because of these articles, even if they might have been insulting, they certainly brought attention to him and his
Yeah.
gifts.
Yeah.
So he kind of had, well, actually, I'll let you do this bit, Jennifer. Do you want to just go into this?
Oh, this is another good one. Because he's always surrounded by these shady characters. I'm thinking they might have a hidden hand in there somewhere. I don't know. It's possible. But there were times in his life that, there was chaos and failure and financial hardships, and a guide would come to him and say, you're around the wrong people. You got to
Yeah.
get away from these people. So I think that was a really interesting thing. And he did kind of go back and forth with being a photographer and doing his readings. He did a lot of joint things with that. He'd have a studio, and then he'd also be doing readings and consulting with doctors. But he was very humble with his gifts. He didn't want money. He turned down good money. Paul is going to explain some more of that here in a bit. But one thing that really was hard, that hardened him, was when he was 55. I think he came to Detroit. I could be wrong. Um, but he went to do readings for people. I think they might have held like a Edgar Cayce's coming to town, the Sleeping Prophet's coming to town, and people probably paid a fee to go see him, and he probably did like so many readings. Well,
Mhm.
they threw him in jail for practicing medicine without a license.
Yeah.
He was in jail for like 3 days. I think he was about 55. And while he was in jail, he was helping all the guys and the people that were in jail better their lives through giving them readings,
Which is just incredible.
explaining to them, yeah, and explaining to them like why they're at the point where they're at and why things have happened to them the way they've happened. So, so he still was in his worst and still was helping people.
Yeah, which just goes to show what kind of an incredible person he was to be doing
Yeah.
that, to be thrown in jail and then he's doing readings on the jails.
Yeah. Like, let me make the best of it. I guess what else am I going to do?
Yeah. But
When he left that jail, when he was released on that, that was the one time the guides came to him, or the
uh-huh.
one guide came to him and said, yeah, this is another time I'm here to tell you, get away from these people. You need to
Yeah.
get away from these people. Because they set, I believe, I'd have to do more research, but it wouldn't surprise me in our world with us kind of realizing how this weird game they're playing is being played. They probably coaxed him to Detroit and set him up.
Yeah, that wouldn't be
That's my,
surprising.
I would,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, they burnt his photography. I mean, he's just had too many weird things happen to him, and we're not even touching all the stuff. We're just doing a quick overview.
Hmm. But this guy that appeared to him, it was almost like he was like an angel in a way, wasn't it? He just popped up and then he'd disappear and then
I can't remember. I, I remember listening to a lecture where they described him, but I don't remember exactly how they described him. It seems like he had some kind of hat on or some kind of turban on or something. That's the only thing I remember. I just took away that he appeared I think 3 different times in his life
uh-huh.
and said, "You're around the wrong people." It
Yeah.
was the same message every time, I think. Because again, that moth to a flame thing, he had all these greedy, manipulative people who wanted information from him.
A hundred
And
percent.
he's just
Yeah.
like, I'm just a good guy, sure.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I mean, he would just be happy to go along because he just wants to help people. And he's
Exactly.
not to know that certain people are dodgy.
He's not in that mindset. he's
Yeah,
not thinking to be manipulative, so it's hard sometimes to detect it.
100%. Yeah. And so, he did get offered really, really good money. I mean, apparently it was $1,000 a day from
Which is
Frederick,
huge.
which is huge money in these days. That's huge money. So he was offered that by Frederick Bonfils, who was the owner of the Denver Post. But he had some conditions along with that. And so those conditions were that he had to do 2 readings a day. He had to wear a turban on his head. He had to be behind a veil. He had to drive around in a Cadillac. And, it was just very much like a big show. And Edgar Cayce just said, look, I'm sorry, but I'm not a showman. So I'm just not doing that. And he wasn't interested. So that goes to show that he was staying true to himself, even though he had so many challenges and was going back and forth. But he did stay true to himself at the end of the day because they weren't exactly, they didn't have much money.
No,
Things weren't really
they
working out for
struggled.
them. They struggled because they started to get ahead with the photography studios, and then the fires happened, set them back. They owed money to the parents who helped them buy the studio. They had to pay back all the art that was on consignment in the studio. So they had all these debts going on. So that would have, an offer like that would have solved all their problems. But he was still just so true to himself that, like, we'll find another way.
And
So,
I just thought of something kind of odd. It's not necessarily about Casey, but it's about that era. I don't know if they had these things in Australia, but in the States here, we'd have like these fortune teller booths, and they'd have like this mechanical fortune teller behind it, and you'd put a coin in it. And it seems like
yes,
the guy had some type of, it was actually invented by a Hungarian. The inventor was Hungarian. I can't remember his name. But it's like I wonder what time frame that when they invented those fortune telling machines and when
uh-huh.
this offer was made to Casey, because did they want to make him into like some carnival show? Like when that's when you
Yeah,
see these fortune telling booths with this mechanical fortune teller was like carnival shows, circuses. And I wonder if they wanted to have him be associated with that. That would make future generations not necessarily be think of him as a credible documented
that
clairvoyant individual.
that is
So
such a
good for
good
Edgar.
point.
He sniffed that one out, I'm
That is
thinking,
such a good point because if he had gone down that path, they would have controlled him. They would have controlled his appearance to the world, and it would have been so easy to write him off that way.
because they've even tried to
Um,
write him off in the 90s, and we'll get to that later. But I mean, even during the 90s, they were trying to debunk Edgar Cayce, and it just never works. It just never works.
yeah, crazy,
So
isn't
it's
it?
interesting. Yeah. So another great quote from one of Edgar's readings is, quote, "Most of us think we need a great deal more than we do," unquote. Casey reading 262-89. He wasn't into the materialistic things. He was happy he had a roof over his head. He was happy he was helping people. He was happy he had a meal in his belly and his kids were healthy.
And that
Simple things that a lot, I mean, it's hard for us to keep focused on those things. A lot, lots taken for granted. So he really stayed in that humble mode.
Yeah, 100%.
And I believe this is a sign from Selma, Alabama, because he
Mm-hmm.
had a photography studio there.
He did, yeah. So The
Um,
Sleeping Prophet,
yeah,
Edgar Cayce, 1877 to 1945, was internationally accepted as an extremely gifted psychic. A humble man, he never profited materially from his psychic ability, but used it to help make manifest the love of God and man. Operated his photography studio and lived in this building from 1912 to 1923. Many psychic readings were given here during that time. So,
yeah. So I think that's awesome. They have a historical marker there for him.
yeah, I think
If
that
I'm
is,
ever down them parts, I'll have to stop and check it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The
So the
ARE.
hospital was a huge dream of his for quite some time, wasn't it, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So this started happening in the mid 1920s to late 1920s. They were going to open the Edgar Cayce Hospital, and he had some staff lined up, which honestly were, I think, believe family members. I believe maybe his sister's husband was supportive of that. He had his staff, but it never really took off because we had the Great Depression come crashing down. He lost financing for it because, of course, these shady people. I mean, I just look at this. I mean, it's just, I look at him and I think about, oh, he's gotten this far, he's getting close to his hospital, and then they just pull that rug out from underneath him and just completely devastate him all over again.
I
And
know.
now, yeah, so there was some turnover with it and
Yeah, it seemed
interesting,
it was up and running for a little bit for a very short
about a
period of
year, I
time.
think, or so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they had some success. But then there was also a bit of a room. So it partially could have been because of the Great Depression, which he also predicted. But
Yes.
also it could have partially been because there were two lots of investors involved. I think it was a David Kahn and then these two Bloomingfield brothers that had invested money in to build the hospital and to build a home for him and Gertrude to live in. And I think also, I mean, so in one of the documentaries, the son was saying that his father wasn't really that great with money. Apparently he would just kind of, and so he would pay for so much extra things for the staff because he cared about them, and which is just beautiful. But I think, maybe he just went a little bit too freely with the money instead of reining it in and making it last. And also there seemed to be some drama between, like, control issues between
Yes.
David Kahn and the brothers. So it's
I
more likely that that was something to do with the reason why the hospital didn't end up succeeding. And apparently, after it closed, they never heard from the brothers again.
if I remember correctly, it seems as if the brothers wanted Casey all to themselves. So
Right.
like Casey wanted to see people. He wanted to have his own patients, but it was my understanding that these investors were like, well, no, we've given you this money, so you're kind of ours and you're kind of like exclusive to us. And there, like you said, I think there was a little bit of pushback where Casey's like, yeah, no, no, that's not how it's going to work with me. And that's when I think it all kind of started unfolding. And he's probably like, oh crap, here we go again, um, with this. But they did bring it back. He did have like he had a newspaper publish. I don't know if it was monthly or quarterly, but he did do like a magazine. Like he did try to keep things, spiritual information being
Yeah.
documented and put out there. And, eventually the ARE did come back. The
Yeah, well, they
building changed
started as a
hands.
non-for-profit organization after that.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And the hospital was apparently became a hotel for a while, and then interestingly, it became a Masonic
Oh,
lodge.
well, no.
Isn't, isn't that
Shocking.
interesting?
Another thing I want to mention about the ARE to our audience as well is what's very interesting about is the location of the ARE, which is the Association for Research and Enlightenment.
Mhm.
Um, they Casey in his readings like pinpointed exactly where to build that
Yeah.
because it would be safe from future cataclysms.
Yes.
So Casey, and we're going to jump a little bit into the Rata material of one of his past lives, which is very interesting because he was a very big part of preserving records.
Hmm.
So I think, in this current incarnation where he was at, it was always a main concern of his to protect and preserve the records. So I think it's interesting how they kind of found that location.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting very interesting.
Yeah, because it could
Because
have
he
been
was from
built
Kentucky.
anywhere.
Yeah, because he was from the South. I mean, it's still kind of the South. I mean, but he was from Kentucky, and this isn't a whole other state.
Hmm.
Not far from Washington, D.C. either, by the way, folks. I mean, our nation's
Interesting.
capital. I'm just saying, there's just some. I just want to connect some dots there. But I'm thankful the ARE is there because they did document so much of his work, and it's a mystery. It's our mystery school. It's a mystery school in plain sight.
Yeah,
You can go study there. Doctors go study there. They have schools. They do a lot of classes on massage therapy based on what his readings were for the health and holistic part of it. So yeah.
yeah, because the Suns bought the ARE back. Well, bought the hospital back from
Yeah.
the Masonic Lodge, I guess. And then so they've developed,
Okay. I know.
yeah, the
This
ARE.
is funny.
Yeah, I just think
Oh,
it's so
this is so
interesting.
ironic that the Masons had it for a bit.
Very, very interesting. But it's great because the Suns were able to kind of help fulfill not the complete dream that Edgar Cayce had, but to at least
Preserving
preserve,
his knowledge.
yeah, at least to preserve the knowledge. And it's open to people to go visit and become members and, actually go through the actual readings. So I think that is really, and I believe they're also putting all of the readings, they're slowly getting them all online. So people like me in Australia, it's not so easy for me to go
Yes.
and visit. So I can become a member and access the online version of the readings. So
Yes.
I think it's great that they're doing that and making it more accessible to people all over the
Yeah.
world. So that's
Yes.
really important.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is
And
Edgar
there he
Cayce
is.
as he's a
There's
little
his
bit
office.
older. Yes, in his
I
office.
believe that I believe that couch is where they counted or they have an idea of an estimate of how many readings he did on that couch that he's sitting on in the picture, in the more colored picture.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
that was his sleeping trance nest right there, where he'd lay
Wow.
down and come up with all the stuff he did. Um, yeah,
And this one looks like this would have been more maybe in the photography
I'm not
studio.
sure. I think on the ARE's website they say where that was taken.
Okay.
I would, yeah. Um, it could be, I don't know. Probably one of the photography studios, I would imagine, or one of the doctor's offices. He worked so many different places.
Yeah. He did. He
He
moved
worked,
around a lot, didn't
he
he?
did, and he worked with a lot of different doctors and would go like travel to their office for readings. I mean, I imagine healthcare was probably pretty good back then, Paul, if you got this guy, Edgar Cayce, helping these doctors who really don't know what they're doing. They're just literally practicing medicine. I'm
Hmm.
sorry that they're practicing it. It's not an art or a skill by any means, and then you get this Casey guy in there, and it had to have just made everything better for him. So I think
Yeah.
Casey was used a lot in that way. I know there was some type of lawsuit, I believe, where basically I think Casey sued a doctor because he owed him so much money that they'd screw him out of paying him and stuff like that, or pay him a lot less than what they said they would, and things like that.
Yeah. Took advantage, didn't they?
Yeah.
So,
He left us so
Susan,
much.
yeah,
Through
he
all
brought,
of that BS, he left so much.
yeah, so much. So, this is some of the topics that we really want to go through in future episodes. We want to talk about all of his holistic healing. He talks about dietary recommendations. He talks about how important it is to move your body and be exercising. Gets into crystals, reincarnation, past lives, your purpose on life in life, and then a lot of ancient things like Atlantis and ancient Egypt and the Akashic records, and it's just incredible. And yeah, he did so many, I mean, over 14,000 readings in
that
one
are documented,
that
that
are
are
documented.
documented.
That's not even the ones.
They say I think he had if I remember correctly, that there was about 1,000 that they didn't record. Like when
Wow.
he first started,
Yes. Yeah.
So, and how do,
Before
yeah,
Gladys came along, I think.
yeah, like when he was probably, well, and you got to think about all those readings he did at those doctor's offices and stuff. That
Yeah.
stuff wasn't really documented then. Maybe in
Yeah.
the doctor's notes, but that's all gone now, you
Yeah.
know.
Hmm.
Probably burned in those fires. I mean,
Yeah. But it's interesting that 900 of them, nearly 1,000 of them, were about
and
Atlantis. I mean,
because
that's,
yes. So we've heard a lot of people say, Dolores Cannon says it, that, the Atlanteans are back and et cetera, et cetera. Edgar Cayce was saying that a lot of Atlanteans were reincarnating to balance
yep.
things they had done. Helena Blavatsky mentioned that there was a lot of mystics from our past, like 100 or so years ago. They all talked about it. So it really isn't anything new.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out that, that the past mystics have left us information that I think's really been overlooked. And I think, and I'm so thankful, Paula, that you're doing this series and we're creating this because there's going to be a lot of things that need to be talked about. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
from my understanding, Edgar Cayce, along with others, was trying to give us a message that a
yes,
warning that
yes.
we need to make changes. And apparently, a lot of people that have reincarnated from Atlantis times that are here now need to, I mean, there's free will, so it's up to them whether they want to choose to make the same bad decisions that they made before or whether they're going to make better decisions this time round. But this is huge, and we really need to learn more about this and learn from our past. Because if we don't learn from the past, you just keep making the same mistakes over and over, and we don't want to have another destruction.
And
Atlantis was destroyed 3 separate times.
yes, there were three major destructions of Atlantis. And what's really fascinating about some of the things he spoke about was about all the ancient cultures prior to Atlantis. Like
Yes.
this has just been this big cycle, and we build temples upon temples. I mean, it's just kind of cycled through time. But one thing I really admire most about some of Casey's work is one of his topics is the sons of the law of one.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people listening to this have probably heard about the raw material and the law of one. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit down the line about, it's interesting how he had a life as a priest called Rata, and then you've got the raw material.
Hmm.
Um, but
And there's the
he
sun
talks about
god
you.
Ra.
Yes, he talks about the universal law,
Uh-huh.
and it's he has his own way of delivering the information. Um, but it's really fascinating to compare and contrast some of it with the raw material.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so it's unbelievable the information he left, and he died at the age of 67, and
Which is quite young.
it is, and his higher self was warning him, you got to stop. He started getting migraines really bad. His
Mhm.
So when he'd go down into these trances, um, that he was warning himself that, hey, you're burning out fast, and he did. And maybe he was just kind of at the point where he's like, I'm good. I know what this is all about. I'm ready. I've left it. It's documented. I mean, I don't know. But one thing I like hearing about Casey is he ate pork and he smoked. He chain smoked and ate pork. And when they would ask him why, he said it grounded him. That was how he stayed grounded, because he also talked about how important it was to be here and to
Yes.
be living your life. And it was just as simple as being kind and not being judgmental towards anyone. Um, so I always kind of got a chuckle at that. And one thing I remember his earliest teachings that I read was everything is okay in moderation.
Yeah.
Like you can be a little naughty with your smoking or your, eating chocolate. I mean, we all have our vices.
We
But yeah,
do.
I always thought moderation was an interesting term he used.
Well,
You know, what's okay?
it's funny because there's not many recordings of his voice, but there's like
Yeah.
one recording, and that is him talking about smoking. And
Oh, really? I've
yes,
never heard that.
yeah, and
Oh, that's great.
it's in one of the biographies I listened to, and I'm going to share some information below in the description box for people that want to have more of a deep dive. But
Yeah.
it's just funny because the source is talking, the entity is talking and saying that, as long as you're having it in moderation, it's okay. And I think the moderation was anywhere from 2 to 6 to 8 cigarettes a day or cigars a day, whatever they were, but no more than that. And yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So there you go.
Interesting.
There you go. And I think the biggest thing is if having things in moderation, but also not feeling guilty about it, because guilt
Yeah.
is actually one of the biggest killers in terms of causing stress and causing issues for our body. And if you're feeling guilty, we all need advice. I mean, come on, life is being on this earth plane is difficult. And I just don't think it's a bad thing to have something that helps to keep you grounded and calm and get you through the day, as long as you're
And just,
having it in healthy moderation.
yeah, yeah.
And and
Um,
and and practicing healthy lifestyle habits, moving your body regularly, eating healthy foods, and as much fresh, produce and plant food based foods that, are not processed as much as
yes.
possible. And I think in the end, he wasn't really following his own advice. He wasn't going for daily walks anymore. He wasn't,
I mean, I don't blame the guy.
yeah,
I don't blame the guy. All he went through, especially I think that whole hospital was just probably almost the nail in the coffin. Even though
yeah,
he did live well, like he died in 45, so yeah, there was quite a few years after that. But before he did pass, he everything was up and running that he had dreamed about, other
yeah,
than the hospital itself. But
yeah.
um
So
and
maybe he just got to the point where he was just like, I'm good now.
I've left.
Yeah.
Yep, I've left it. It's documented. It's time to move on.
Mhm.
Um,
But it's also
but yeah,
interesting that near the end of his life, that's when he really ramped up the readings. He was doing so many
I
more than in the past. And that's what was taking its toll on him. But also, what ramped up was the subject material. And it was all of this
yes,
stuff about past life, reincarnation, karma, soul purpose, Atlantis. All of this stuff was coming up in the droves near the end of his life. And it's almost like, the higher being
warning.
or the source was like, okay, you're nearing the end of your life. We need to get this info out.
Yeah, warning. Alarm
Yeah,
bells coming in here. And I also want to mention something else to our audiences that Edgar Cayce did not channel.
yeah,
He did not channel. Um, he would go into a deep state, and we're going to get into this in our next episode about
yeah.
the Akashic records, and we're going to explain
Explain it
what his
more deeply.
readings were about that. But yeah, he did not channel.
Yeah.
He was his own spiritually evolved soul that came down here and stuck to his mission.
Mhm.
Um, and rolled through those big wrecking ball punches he endured his entire life.
Yeah,
And for that, I have a lot of admiration for him. Um,
absolutely.
and but yeah, I think he did a lot of what maybe like remote viewing, astral traveling, mind viewing,
Mhm.
which we're going to get into more in the next episode. But yeah, he did not channel. I just want to, because that was mind blowing to me when I found that out. It took me years to even wrap my head around how this guy knew this stuff until I started studying what he left behind. And you have to do it in increments to even be able to wrap your head around it to digest how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a lot. It's a lot. So
It
you got to
is.
kind of take it in stages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a head bender, mind bender, brain bender. Yeah, whatever you want to. Headache. It's a headache. So, yeah, it's messed up.
Oh, so funny.
But one thing I wanted to mention of his last recorded words was he emphasized love, humility, and service to others,
Mhm.
which he did.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gertrude passed away only just a few months after him.
Which, yeah, isn't that like,
I
yeah.
think
So
she
that kind
probably
of
just,
shows the bond
yeah,
that of all they endured as a married couple. I'm sure it was very hard.
yeah,
And the
a lot
bond
of
they
sacrifice.
created going through all that BS they endured,
Yeah.
she probably felt very lost without him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
the Akashic Records, we just talked about that. I'm going to let you read that reading quote there, Paula, because speaking of brain benders,
yeah, this is a bit of a brain bender.
the blueprint of your soul. Yes.
So the record that the individual entity itself writes upon the skein of time and space through patience and is opened when self has attuned to the infinite and may be read by those attuning to that consciousness. Edgar Cayce 2 from reading 2533-8. So we all have the ability to access this information. Edgar Cayce has talked about fairies and angels and all kinds of stuff, and we all have the ability to connect into this, but it's about tapping into that consciousness. That is what is preventing us from seeing these things. So we are just so excited to deep dive into these topics in this series. And we'd also love to hear from you guys as well. If you're familiar with Edgar Cayce at all, if there's anything in particular that you would love us to deep dive into. I mean, we plan on
Let
doing
us
a
know.
lot of different things, but we'd love to hear from you as well to share your comments below. Yeah. And also, I mean, his biography, there's a biography about him called There is a River. And as far as I know, it's not available as an Audible book. So that is a possibility I could read that on my channel as well if people were interested. So, just let us know. But he really was a fascinating man with an incredible life, a lot of challenges. Oh my goodness. There would have been a lot of highs and lows, I think. And also
100%.
just within, this constant fighting of do I want to live my purpose and have my gifts, but I also want to just be a normal person and, just live a normal life.
I want to mention one other thing, audience. I'm sorry, I'm going to backtrack a minute to when the photography studios burned.
Yeah.
He did have to stay behind in while Gertrude and Hugh Lynn I believe, went with her family because they were struggling
Yeah. And he had to pay off the debts.
financially. Yeah, but he started using his gift. He started doing a little
Yes.
gambling and a little like betting on some stuff, and he lost his gifts because he was utilizing them for not positive things. So,
Mhm.
and I believe it was right before he might have went to Selma, Alabama as a photographer, that he would tell people, yeah, I used to be able to do this. I used to be able to do all these holistic readings and, but I lost them. I can't do them anymore. Um, and so I wanted to mention that. So it was important, I think, in a lesson for Casey to know where to draw the line
Yeah.
with how to utilize his gifts. And another thing we didn't mention, this goes back to where he was kind of tested on and, in my opinion, experimented on while he was in a trance state, is they'd be like, okay, like we want to know about this or this type of healing. And they're like, so who's going to win the next horse race? Or what numbers should I play? I don't know if there was a lottery back then. But they would try to get
Well, share
like
market
things.
information.
Yes, thank you. I think that was more stock market. My brain, there was just, we've been absorbing so much Edgar
Yeah.
Cayce information. But yeah, to play the stock market. So these like elite little boogers would just throw that in there to try to get.
To
So
use
yeah,
him. Yeah. to use
Use
him to
him. So I wanted to
predict.
mention that to the audience too, that that was another thing, another form of manipulation that was done to him.
Yeah, and he experienced a lot of
And
that.
that's why
Yeah.
Gertrude pulled up her bootstraps and was like,
Yeah.
enough is enough.
Yeah, she would have become
Good
quite
for
protective.
Gertrude. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But
But
yeah,
anyway,
what an amazing life he had.
and
Yeah.
more, much more to come.
Yes, so much more to come. So thank
Yes.
you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Jennifer, for
Yes.
all
Thank
your
you for
hard
having me.
work and helping me put this together. I'm just so excited to do this series, and we hope everyone's going to love it as much as we are. We're going to try and get the episodes out as consistently as we can, but we are learning as we're going. Jennifer's been studying Edgar Cayce for quite a few years. I'm a little bit more new to Edgar Cayce, but we are learning as we're going and we're loving it. We're
It
absolutely
is.
loving it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But obviously, just be patient with us if we don't always get the episodes out as consistently as we'd like to. And
We're gonna try.
we're going to
We're gonna
try.
try.
Yeah, but we also want to bring you good quality information too.
Yes.
So, yeah, and please share what you want to learn about. I mean, he covered so many topics, so many. So, yeah, please do share them with us. And
I mean, he even talks about the lost continent of Mu and
yeah,
Lemurian.
I know. Yeah, there's just so much to go into.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. So awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed our overview of Edgar Cayce and his life, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.